Welcome back. You're watching To The Point, and we're discussing Indo-Pakistan relations in the wake of yesterday's surprise announcement that the two countries' national security advisors met secretly for 4 hours in Bangkok. Salman Bashir, Sushma Swaraj, the Indian Foreign Minister, will be travelling to Pakistan tomorrow for the Heart of Asia conference, and it's known that she will be calling both upon Sardar Aziz as well as Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. How confident are you that her visit could lead to the announcement of a detailed schedule of talks stretching over weeks and months? Sardar Aziz, speaking to your media today, clearly said that this is what he's hoping for. How confident are you this will happen?
Karan, I think it is possible. There may not be a detailed schedule of dates for the talks that may be the outcome, one of the outcomes of her Sushma Swaraj visit to Islamabad. But I think certainly the process of engagement has to be sustained. And to sustain that, I think both sides have to be mindful of 2 or 3 things. One is that there are relatively easy subjects, issues that can be sort of dealt with rather easily, and there are other very complex issues which will take time. So I think at a meeting like at the level of Sushma Swaraj, probably what would happen would be an exchange of views on how to, take this, how to pace the process. I think that is one. For instance, to my mind, I think that some of the easiest issues that I can think of on which there should be no disagreement is the humanitarian issues. It's the plight of prisoners, the fishermen. It is also matters like the easier visas, visa facilitation, on which already there is agreement between the two sides. Then 3, I think, of course, they have already discussed the ceasefire thing, the tranquility on the LOC. That needs to be, that is again an easy one actually, to sort of firm up. And similarly, the trade issue could be a good subject to talk about.
Okay.
And of course, they have to also think of ways and means to deal with the more, complex and important issues.
Let me stop you there. Let's take these one by one. Krishnan Srinivasan, the extent to which this now leads to a whole series of structured talks on a series of issues that are there between the two countries, in a sense, depends upon how far Mr. Modi is prepared to go. There's no doubt he's taken a very important, significant step with the Bangkok meeting. But as you read his mind, do you believe he's now prepared to go whole hog?
Well, I can't pretend to read his mind, of course, but I will say that I'm very encouraged, but I am also skeptical about the kind of agenda which has been mentioned by one of your previous speakers. I think that we've got to take this just one step at a time. With these building blocks, I think we're beginning really at the base. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if the pace is not as fast as we expect. The cricket matches perhaps is an easy thing to get done. The foreign minister, of course, is going to Pakistan, which is good. I don't honestly expect a very rapid movement. I would be happy if there is some steady and fairly structured movement moving ahead. But I don't expect any giant leaps forward. I think what is important to note, though, is that the dynamism of this relationship depends on the two prime ministers. Provided they breathe life into the process, I think there is good room to be optimistic.
Aziz Ahmed Khan, you've heard 2 very different views about how the future could hereafter pan out. Your colleague sitting beside you, Salman Bashir, is hopeful that a whole range of talks can start on easier subjects first and on the more difficult ones thereafter. Krishnan Srinivasan feels that perhaps one ought to take this a step at a time, and that some of the ambitiousness in Salman Bashir's vision may not be realizable quite so quickly or so easily. Will there be disappointment in Pakistan if it's one step at a time?
You see, I don't see any contradiction between the views expressed by Mr. Salman Bashir and Shri Krishnan Srinivasan. It's both gel with each other. What Salman has talked about is that a dialogue process has to be started where all issues are going to be discussed, and that's quite obvious from even the statement that was issued in Bangkok. How that will be worked out, obviously there will be a different series of meetings. For example, we had a format last time which was a composite dialogue format. Apparently India is not too keen on that at the moment, although they were the one who had suggested it at that time. So now let us see what kind of a format they agree to, what kind of an approach they agree to. Everything is step by step. In any case, there is no such thing as rushing to the thing, but at the same time the idea is to discuss the whole slew of issues that are between the two countries.
Okay.
Of course, there are certain issues which are easily resolvable and forward movement is easier, like cricket match or like people-to-people contact, easier visa regime. There are a lot of CBMs that we have already agreed to in the past, which are not being implementing those, for example. And there are the more difficult issues like Kashmir and terrorism, which would require a little longer time and longer discussion and so on. So there's really no contradiction in the two opinions expressed.
You know, Satyapal, the two key issues are in fact the two difficult ones. Terror from India's point of view, Kashmir from Pakistan's point of view. Would it make sense for the two countries to decide that these two subjects ought to be handled at a more elevated level so that both think the other side is giving the priority to the issue that matters most to it? Perhaps handle it at a special representative level so that importance is given, and then make sure that the easier subjects continue to be handled either in the composite dialogue or the foreign secretary level. Would that sort of bifurcation make sense?
You know, that bifurcation, bifurcation always has taken place. It's always
except at the foreign secretary level. I'm now saying create a special level, a higher level.
No, even when the foreign secretaries discussed Kashmir and terrorism in the counter-terrorism committee, you discussed these two issues in particular at the political level. Sometimes in the back channel, but also at the political level. So you always gave these two subjects a particularly special importance, given the centrality that they have. But I agree with Aziz that what we need to do now, and I hope that's what the two foreign offices will do. So the High Commissions and the foreign offices sit together, and as has happened in the past, to work out a schedule of meetings. And no one expects breakthroughs, but at least the schedule of meetings on all the issues that we've discussed in the past and several others that we may not have discussed in the past.
So that everyone knows when those meetings are happening.
That's right. And as that process kicks in, and once it begins to work smoothly, that creates its own dynamic, which makes it easier at least to discuss in substance the more difficult issues.
Kamal Sibal, the tricky issue for Mr. Modi will be the handling of Kashmir. Do you think he'll be prepared to have a comprehensive dialogue about Kashmir? Because that is actually what Pakistan wants, and in its absence, the sort of frustrations that scuppered all the processes up till now will re-emerge again. So is Mr. Modi mentally prepared for that?
You know, I've always asked the question, what does Pakistan want in Jammu and Kashmir? I mean, do they want more territory in Jammu and Kashmir? They're not willing to settle for the status quo. And now the China-Pakistan economic corridor has actually made the problem far more complex, because China is squarely now siding with Pakistan on Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So this will actually become a potential bone of contention, because it's also violative of the UN resolutions and the fact that Pakistan calls Jammu and Kashmir disputed territory. There'll be differences over agreeing on the agenda and the sequence of talks. These will be difficult issues to resolve, because Pakistan would insist, as was said by Aziz just now, for 10 years we've been doing what we've been doing, and let's continue to do the same. So this is not something that India would agree to, and therefore would require a great deal of discussion. So on Jammu and Kashmir, to answer your specific question, I fail to understand what Pakistan really wants in Jammu and Kashmir, because on the one hand they say they know they cannot take away Jammu and Kashmir, there can't be territorial changes, but at the same time their whole policy is to put the focus on Jammu and Kashmir and link everything else to progress on Jammu and Kashmir without defining what this progress is. And if they consider Hurriyat the true representatives of the Kashmir people, then I can't see any real understanding developing between India and Pakistan on this issue.
So, Krishna Srinivasan, the suggestion I get from Kamal Sibal is that the Kashmir issue is lurking on the horizon and maybe not so far down the road as the obstacle on which the talks will trip. Do you see it that way?
Well, yes, I think that it's clear from the discussion so far that once you get into the details, it's going to be extremely complicated. This is why I would be really happy if it is taken really in baby steps. And we've had so many false dawns that we really don't want another one. I think the Bangkok meeting has raised a great deal of expectation, and that's very good. But to handle that expectation, I think one should keep moving forward in a positive way. And I think if you leap to the hard issues, rapidly, it's going to break down. This whole process is going to break down very fast. So I would prefer, after the foreign minister's visit to Pakistan, something maybe much more modest, something achievable, something which in the next few months and before the SARC conference, and when the Prime Minister himself hopefully will go to Pakistan and give more life to this whole process. If we start taking these difficult issues more or less immediately after just an initial meeting in Bangkok, I think the whole thing is going to flounder.
But if you don't take up the difficult issue of Kashmir, then Mr. Nawaz Sharif will be left hostage to his critics and perhaps to the army in particular in his country, and Pakistan will feel that in fact no progress is being achieved at all. So how do you square the circle?
By talking. I don't think there is any...
And on the difficult issue as well?
As well.
So you disagree with Krishna Srinivasan here?
On that point, simply because if we were to, as it were, keep these two aside, then we'll be back to square one. That's how we got ourselves into this impasse.
So the bullet has to be bitten, even if you chip a tooth or two.
That's right. And but I think if you bite the bullet and then do, as it were, through gritted teeth, start talking, I think the process of talking is what I think you need to make it I completely agree. It'll be difficult. It will be fractious, the talks themselves. But the fact that you're talking and talking seriously, it's entirely possible that we'll then learn more than we do now of what exactly it is.
So the process, as you're describing it, is actually going to be a test of the commitment and will of the two prime ministers to have to face up to difficult talks but carry on talking nonetheless.
Absolutely.
And also, it's a test of their capacity to stand up to their respective critics in their country, including the media, who will look to find fault.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is, I think, would be a true test both of their political strength and of their statesmanship.
And if they fail the test, they're letting their countries down.
Well, let's hope they don't.
All right. My thanks to you for that particular answer. My thanks also to my other guests for joining me. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye.